When you use Wi-Fi to stream this video, check your smartphone, or receive a pacemaker that saves your life, you're using Australian innovation. Yet ask most people where these technologies came from, and they'll point to Silicon Valley. That disconnect between origin and credit isn't just historically inaccurate. It reveals how we misunderstand innovation itself. In the next 10 minutes, we'll explore 10 groundbreaking Australian inventions that transformed modern life. These aren't obscure contributions. They're technologies you interact with daily. From the wireless connection, making this conversation possible, to the medical devices keeping millions alive, Australian scientists and engineers created solutions that became invisible parts of modern existence. If you're curious about the hidden stories behind everyday technology, hit subscribe. We're uncovering the real origins of innovations that shape your daily life, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's start with something fundamental to watching this video right now. In 1992, astronomer John O'Sullivan was working at CSIRO, Australia's national science agency, in Sydney. His mission? Search for faint radio signals from exploding black holes at the edge of the universe. The problem was interference. Radio waves bounce off walls, creating echoes that distort signals. O'Sullivan's team developed a sophisticated method to filter out this noise and identify the original signal. They never found the black holes they were searching for. But in solving that astronomical puzzle, they created something infinitely more useful for humanity: the technology that became Wi-Fi. Here's what most people don't realize. Wi-Fi isn't just wireless internet. It's a complex system that allows multiple devices to share the same radio frequencies without interference, using O'Sullivan's echo filtering technique. CSIRO filed the patent in 1996. By 2012, they'd won over $430 million in patent disputes against tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, Dell, and others who'd used the technology without licensing it. The irony is profound. Technology designed to listen to the universe's most violent explosions now connects 18 billion devices worldwide. Your laptop, smartphone, smart TV, doorbell, thermostat, all using O'Sullivan's method of cleaning up messy radio signals. The key takeaway? Sometimes the most transformative inventions come from solving problems in completely different fields. O'Sullivan wasn't trying to revolutionize home connectivity. He was looking at black holes. But wireless connectivity wasn't the only medical breakthrough Australia gifted the world. In 1967, Professor Graham Clark was walking along an Australian beach, thinking about his deaf father. For years, Clark had been obsessed with a seemingly impossible question. Could you restore hearing by directly stimulating the auditory nerve with electrical signals? The problem was mechanical. The cochlea, the spiral-shaped organ in your inner ear, has delicate nerve endings arranged along its length. Different frequencies stimulate different positions. To replicate natural hearing, you need to thread multiple electrodes through that narrow, winding tunnel without damaging tissue. Clark picked up a blade of grass from the sand. Idly, he tried pushing it through the narrow opening of a seashell spiral. The blade's stiffness near the base let him guide it in, while the flexible tip followed the curve. In that moment, he understood how to design the electrode array. 11 years later, in 1978, Clark performed the first multi-channel cochlear implant surgery. The patient, Rod Saunders, heard his wife's voice for the first time in years. But here's what's remarkable. The device doesn't actually restore normal hearing. It converts sound into electrical patterns that the brain learns to interpret as speech and music. According to FDA data from 2022, over 736,000 people worldwide now have cochlear implants. For children born profoundly deaf, the device has fundamentally altered life trajectories, enabling language development, education, and social integration that would have been impossible a generation ago. Clark's breakthrough transformed deafness from a permanent condition into one that could be partially overcome. It represented a paradigm shift in medical technology, directly interfacing with the nervous system to replace lost function. What should you remember? The cochlear implant wasn't just an engineering achievement. It required understanding neuroscience, material science, surgery, and signal processing simultaneously. True innovation often happens at the intersection of multiple disciplines. From restoring hearing to protecting hearts, Australian medical innovation continued with another life-saving device. You probably know Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928 when mold contaminated his bacterial cultures. But discovery means nothing without delivery. And it was an Australian, Howard Florey, who transformed penicillin from a laboratory curiosity into medicine's most powerful weapon. In 1940, Florey led a team at Oxford facing a critical problem. Penicillin worked miraculously in mice infected with lethal bacteria. They survived, controls died. But producing enough penicillin to treat even one human patient required the mold from 2,000 liters of culture fluid. Scaling that to treat soldiers wounded in World War II seemed impossible. Florey developed the deep fermentation method using corn steep liquor, a byproduct of corn processing, as a growth medium in large tanks. This process increased yields 1,000-fold and made mass production feasible. By 1945, American pharmaceutical companies were producing 650 billion units monthly. The World Health Organization estimates penicillin has saved over 200 million lives since World War II. Florey shared the 1945 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine with Fleming and Ernst Borschain, but ask most people who discovered penicillin, and they'll only mention Fleming. Here's the lesson. Discovery and implementation are both critical steps in innovation. Fleming found penicillin. Florey made it accessible. Neither achievement diminishes the other, but history often remembers the first more than the second, even though the second often has greater impact. Fleming's penicillin couldn't save anyone until Florey made it scalable. That's true of countless innovations. The engineering that brings breakthrough science to billions is innovation too. While Florey was saving lives through chemistry, another Australian was revolutionizing how we preserve them. After a string of unexplained aircraft crashes in the 1950s, including disasters involving the world's first jet airliners, the aviation industry faced a terrifying problem. Planes were falling from the sky, and investigators couldn't determine why. Australian scientist David Warren, working at the Aeronautical Research Laboratory in Melbourne, had an idea. What if aircraft carried an indestructible recorder that captured flight data and cockpit conversations? After a crash, investigators could hear and see exactly what happened in those final moments. In 1958, Warren built the first prototype. The Australian government rejected it. British aviation authorities dismissed it. American regulators showed no interest. The reasoning? Pilots' unions worried about privacy. Airlines feared liability. Regulators didn't want the expense. It took tragedy to change minds. In 1960, a plane crashed in Queensland, killing 29 people. The cause remained a mystery. Shortly after, Britain finally tested Warren's device. Today, the International Civil Aviation Organization requires both flight data and cockpit voice recorders on all commercial aircraft. According to NTSB analysis, flight recorders have contributed to reducing fatal accident rates by approximately 70% since 1970. Not by preventing crashes, by helping engineers understand what went wrong and fix those problems in every other aircraft. Here's what's uncomfortable. The most important safety innovations often face resistance precisely because they force industries to confront difficult truths. Warren's black box worked. The technology was sound. But implementing it meant acknowledging that planes crashed and that understanding those failures mattered more than protecting industry image. Sometimes innovation isn't just about creating something new. It's about having the courage to deploy solutions that powerful interests would prefer to ignore. From aviation safety to everyday convenience, Australian inventions often solve problems we didn't know we had. In 1926, at Sydney's Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, Mark Lidwell faced every doctor's nightmare. A newborn baby, delivered stillborn, no heartbeat. Time was running out. Lidwell grabbed a device he'd been developing, a portable apparatus that delivered controlled electrical impulses. He placed an electrode directly onto the baby's heart. The tiny organ began beating. The baby survived. This was the world's first successful use of an artificial pacemaker on a human. But Lidwell never published his work. Medical convention of the era considered it too radical, too dangerous. Direct electrical stimulation of the heart that challenged fundamental assumptions about the boundaries of medical intervention. It took 3 decades before pacemakers became standard treatment. Today, over 3 million people worldwide live with pacemakers, according to the American Heart Association. Modern devices are sophisticated, monitoring heart rhythms, adjusting stimulation in real time, even transmitting data to physicians remotely. But they trace directly to Lidwell's design principles: controlled electrical impulses to regulate cardiac rhythm. The takeaway here isn't just about the technology. It's about how medical breakthroughs often happen in quiet hospital rooms, not celebrated laboratories. And sometimes they take decades to receive recognition because they challenge existing paradigms. Lidwell's story reminds us that innovation requires not just technical skill, but also the willingness to try the untested when lives are at stake, and the humility to work without recognition when that's what circumstances demand. While Lidwell was pioneering cardiac care, another Australian innovation was about to change how we see ourselves. In 2003, if you wanted directions, you used paper maps or called someone for guidance. Digital mapping existed, but it was clunky. You'd type an address, wait for a page to load, then click arrow buttons to pan around. It was like looking at the world through a tiny, frozen window. In Sydney, 2 Danish-born brothers, Lars and Jens Rasmussen, had a different vision. Working at a startup called Where 2 Technologies with Australian developers, they created a web-based mapping system that felt fluid and responsive. You could drag the map smoothly, zoom in and out seamlessly, and overlay satellite imagery. In 2004, Google acquired Where 2 Technologies. Most tech journalists had never heard of the company. The following year, Google launched the technology as Google Maps, and it revolutionized navigation. Today, Google Maps has over 1 billion monthly active users according to Alphabet's 2023 earnings reports. The app processes over 1 billion kilometers of driving data daily, helping people navigate everywhere from Manhattan to Mumbai. Here's what's striking. This wasn't Silicon Valley innovation. It was a small team in Sydney solving a practical problem, making digital maps feel intuitive. They succeeded so well that Google integrated their work into one of its core products. The lesson? Transformative innovation doesn't require being in traditional tech hubs. It requires understanding user frustration and having the technical skill to solve it elegantly. The Rasmussen brothers weren't trying to build the world's most popular navigation app. They were making maps that didn't frustrate people. From digital navigation to capturing memories, Australian technology continued reshaping daily life. Pick up a bill from your wallet if it's plastic rather than paper. There's a good chance you're holding Australian innovation. In the 1960s, Australia faced a counterfeiting crisis. Paper currency deteriorated quickly, especially in Australia's humid climate, and forgers were getting sophisticated. The Reserve Bank of Australia asked Cyro researchers, "Can we build a better banknote?" The team developed a polymer substrate with transparent windows, impossible to produce without specialized equipment. They added holograms, color-shifting ink, and other security features that made counterfeiting exponentially harder. The first polymer note entered circulation in 1988. Skeptics predicted they'd melt in hot cars and crack in cold weather. Instead, they lasted 2.5 times longer than paper notes and reduced counterfeiting rates by up to 90%. Today, over 30 countries use polymer banknotes, according to the Reserve Bank of Australia. That includes major economies like the United Kingdom, Canada, and Mexico. The technology has saved governments hundreds of millions in replacement costs while significantly reducing counterfeiting. But here's the deeper innovation. Cyro didn't just make money more durable. They rethought currency as an engineering challenge. What material properties do you need? What security features work against modern counterfeiting techniques? How do you balance durability with printability? The practical takeaway: Sometimes innovation means questioning the fundamental material we've used for centuries and asking, is there actually a better way? But Australia's contribution to modern technology wasn't limited to what we carry. It extended to how we capture life itself. In 1999, Surgeon Fiona Wood was treating a patient with severe burns at Royal Perth Hospital. Traditional skin grafting required harvesting healthy skin from another part of the body, expanding it in a laboratory over weeks, then grafting it onto burns. The process was slow, painful, and left massive scarring. Wood asked a fundamental question: why couldn't you spray skin cells directly onto the wound? She developed a technique to culture a small sample of healthy skin cells, suspend them in a solution, and apply them via spray gun directly to burn areas. The cells attach to the wound bed and begin regenerating skin tissue immediately. 3 years later, her method faced its greatest test. The 2002 Bali bombings left dozens of Australians with catastrophic burns. Wood treated 28 of the most severe cases. All 28 survived, a survival rate that would have been unthinkable with traditional methods. Clinical trials published in the medical journal Burns in 2018 show spray-on skin reduces healing time by up to 60% compared to conventional grafting. Even more importantly, it produces better cosmetic outcomes, reducing the psychological trauma of visible scarring. Here's the profound lesson. Sometimes the most revolutionary medical advances come from surgeons on the front lines, not pharmaceutical corporations with billion-dollar R&D budgets. Wood saw patients suffering and asked how existing technology could be reimagined to serve them better. That question, how can we do this better for this specific person in front of me, drives innovation as powerfully as any abstract research goal. From healing bodies to protecting them, Australian innovation has consistently found elegant solutions to complex problems. In the 1950s, Australian engineer George Kossoff and physicist David Robinson were experimenting with sonar technology at the Commonwealth Acoustic Laboratories in Sydney. They were working on submarine detection, sending sound waves through water and analyzing the echoes. Then they had a realization. The same principles that detected submarines underwater could image structures inside the human body. Sound waves penetrate tissue, bounce off organs with different densities, and return to a receiver. Process those echoes correctly, and you can see inside someone without surgery or radiation. Their work led to the first clinically practical ultrasound scanner in 1961. Early images were crude, barely discernible shapes, but the technology improved rapidly. Today, the World Health Organization estimates over 50 million ultrasound examinations occur annually just for prenatal care. The technology has expanded to cardiac imaging, vascular diagnostics, cancer detection, and emergency medicine. Ultrasound is now often the first imaging choice for everything from appendicitis to heart disease. Here's what's remarkable. Ultrasound doesn't expose patients to radiation, it's relatively inexpensive, and it provides real-time imaging. Those advantages made it accessible globally, even in resource-limited settings. The takeaway? Military technology repurposed for healing. Kossoff and Robinson weren't trying to revolutionize medicine. They were submarine hunters who recognized that sound waves don't discriminate. They reveal hidden structures, whether in oceans or in bodies. Innovation often comes from unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated fields. The skill isn't just in developing technology. It's in recognizing when that technology solves problems far beyond its original purpose. And finally, one Australian invention literally keeps food on your table. In 1856, James Harrison, a Scottish immigrant to Australia, was cleaning printing type with ether in his Geelong newspaper office. He noticed something odd. As the ether evaporated, the metal type became extremely cold. That observation sparked a question. Could you create cold artificially and control it? Harrison developed the first practical vapor compression refrigeration system, essentially the same principle used in modern refrigerators and air conditioners. Liquid refrigerant evaporates, absorbing heat. The gas is then compressed, releasing the heat elsewhere. Harrison initially sold his machines to breweries and meatpacking plants. But his real vision was bigger, preserving meat for long-distance shipping. Australia had vast grazing lands and abundant livestock, but struggled to export meat before it spoiled. Refrigeration changed everything. It made Australia's meat export industry possible and altered global food distribution. Today, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, modern refrigeration prevents approximately 1.3 billion tons of food waste annually. It fundamentally altered human nutrition and where people could live comfortably. Cities in hot climates became viable. Fresh food became accessible year-round everywhere. The deeper innovation wasn't just the machine, it was understanding that controlling temperature could reshape economics and society. Harrison's refrigeration didn't just preserve food. It changed global trade patterns, nutrition, and the geographical distribution of human populations. So what connects all 10 of these innovations? What connects Wi-Fi to polymer banknotes, cochlear implants to Google Maps, spray-on skin to refrigeration? Each emerged from Australian scientists and engineers solving practical problems with limited resources, often outside the spotlight of major tech hubs. These weren't inventions designed for viral marketing campaigns or IPO launches. They were solutions to real challenges. How do we help deaf children hear? How do we learn from plane crashes? How do we keep hearts beating? How do we stop food from rotting? The inventors often worked with constrained budgets, limited infrastructure, and small teams. Maybe that forced creativity. When you can't throw money at a problem, you have to think more carefully about elegant solutions. And while American companies often commercialized and scaled these technologies, which absolutely requires its own innovation, the foundational breakthroughs happened in Sydney laboratories, Melbourne hospitals, Adelaide research facilities, and Perth operating rooms. And if you value deep dives into the real stories behind everyday technology, subscribe for more. We're cutting through the mythology to find the truth about who builds what we use daily. Thanks for watching.